Submit a dispute. So sometimes what happens is as a part of recurring bill plan, you end up in having some dispute with the customer. For example, initially it has been agreed that the customer will run a cloud server 24/7, and based on that a contract gets signed. Then you end up in creating a contract as a recurring bill plan in Oracle Receivables cloud, but the customer ends up in using just 5 days out of 7 days week, and 2 days the server is shut. So in such a case, even though you have billed the customer for 7 days based on recurring bill plan arrangements, the customer can dispute the amount and raise a dispute against that invoice. So that dispute is first sent for review from the collector. So one process flow is the customer submits that dispute, and the second process flow is customer informs the collector, and the collector on behalf of the customer submits the dispute. In both cases, the collector has to review the disputed amount and then to submit it, but he can't approve it himself, and it is sent for approval to higher authorities such as a receivables manager or a collections manager. And based on the approval of that dispute, a credit memo is automatically created. So first I'm going to go into Oracle Fusion Receivables Cloud, and I'm going to show you this feature. So there I am in Fusion Receivables Cloud, and first I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Receivables from the navigator, and you can see billing out here. And then I'm going to go into the taskbar, and then I will go into manage recurring billing plans. And here I'm going to search the recurring billing plan, let's say by business unit, US 1 business unit, and then I'm going to give a customer name over here, say computer service, something like that the customer starts with. So I'm going to search by partial name, so that's the name of the customer, computer service and rentals, and I'm going to search by this customer. So there are two recurring bill plans. One I have used for my testing purposes, and second I have used for our demonstration. So I'm going to go into the one I have created earlier for testing purposes, and within this particular recurring bill plan we'll have invoices associated. So I'm going to look at the invoices. So as you could see, this particular recurring bill plan has been created for 168 quantity or 168 hours, which is equivalent to 24/7. So if you multiply 24 multiplied by 7, it comes to 168. So basically a week of hours, and the unit price per hour is $10. So this is for a cloud server hired, and the total weekly amount is $1,680. So for that, a recurring bill plan is set up on a weekly basis, and for that invoices were generated and sent to the customer. So if I look at the transactions, here is the invoice which was generated. So I'm going to click on this particular recurring invoice. So as you could see, with tax, the amount increments to a total of $1,835.40 US. Fine. And right here, one can raise a dispute. So in this case, the customer has raised a dispute, and accordingly they have submitted that dispute for using only 5 days a week transaction. You see, can you see that submitted dispute? So that's where the customer has submitted a dispute. So in this particular case, since I am like a I'm like a collector. I'm not logged in as a customer, so I have submitted the dispute on behalf of the customer as a collector using this function submit a dispute. And once you submit a dispute, it will be sent to the collectors manager or receivables manager for his or her review, and then they can potentially approve or decline that dispute. If they decline, nothing happens, but if they approve, then a credit memo will be generated automatically, and that credit memo will be applied to this particular invoice automatically, as you could see. So 2 days worth of dispute was raised. A credit memo was subsequently approved by the receivables manager, and it is applied automatically to this invoice, resulting in reduction of balance, and that balance the customer will be paying subsequently. So behind the scenes there is a workflow that runs which tracks this entire approval process flow, and you can always look at the details and review the history of that. So if I see view transaction activities, you see, can you see that there is a credit memo that was raised, and it was applied to this particular invoice. Okay, so now it's time for us to understand how to submit a dispute. Okay, so I've explained you the end-to-end process of how a dispute can be raised on behalf of a customer by a collector, and how it can be reviewed by a collections manager or a receivables manager, and based on the approval how a credit memo gets applied to the recurring invoice automatically and the balance gets reduced. Okay, so now what I will do is I'm going to cancel and come out of this particular recurring invoice, and then what I will do is I'm going to come out of this contract as well. Now I'm going to go and look at another contract for recurring bill plan that I have created for demonstration, which is the first one ending with 9965. So I'm going to click on the hyperlink for that particular contract. So as you could see, this is also similar. It is on a weekly basis, having a 1 year duration, and every week the invoice will be generated and sent to the customer, and based on the assumption that the customer uses the cloud server of 128 GB RAM 24/7. Okay, so for that the recurring bill plan line has been created. Okay, and based on this we have generated a transaction, and that transaction is over here. So this is an invoice generated from recurring bill plan, and you can call this as well as a just an invoice or a recurring invoice. And the original you see the amount is 2753.10 USD, including 233.10 tax. Okay, now at this point, let's say the customer says that I've used this for 6 days and I haven't used it for 1 day, which is Sunday. The server was shut. Okay, so there could be multiple business scenarios. I'm just trying to make you understand the entire dispute process, but don't take this as just one business process per se. This is just an example. Okay, and it's just a very simple example. There could be multiple other examples. My idea is to show you the functionality of how a dispute gets created, approved, and how a credit memo gets generated and applied to the recurring invoice automatically. Okay, so I'm gonna submit a dispute on behalf of the customer. The customer can as well submit a dispute if you give access to this function via the customer portal. But let's say I am like a collector. So in this case, I am like a financial implementer, also defined as a collector. But in the next lesson, I'm going to show you, in fact, I'm going to log in as a collector, and I'm going to show you how a collector as such can submit a dispute. So I'm just acting as a collector, and I have just clicked on submit a dispute. So here you can dispute. So you can start by dispute section, and then you give a dispute reason over here. So let's say something like credit and rebill. Dispute type, if you wish, you can enter it something like based on AS, amber, green or red, but you can always define your own types if you like, and then you can say something like it's it could be a red dispute, okay, and then or an amber, I would say, it's not very important. And then here I would come and give a dispute quantity. So in this case the quantity is in hours. So the business scenario that I've explained you is the customer hasn't used the server for 24 hours, that is on Sunday, whereas rest of the week he has used it. So I would enter dispute quantity as 24 hours, okay, and then the dispute amount will be generated automatically based on the unit price of what you have set in your recurring bill plan, okay. And in this particular case it is coming from the invoice generated out of recurring bill plan. And then if you wish, you can write a summary over here. So let's say the customer states that server was shut down on Sunday for 24 hours, hence request for a refund, please approve, okay. Now since you are acting like a collector, you can also write internal comments. So this is something based on what you heard from the customer. Since you are submitting this dispute on behalf of the customer, now internal comments you can raise it over here. So you can say that customer called and requested for this dispute to be raised on behalf, okay, and then you can proceed ahead and submit this dispute. So as soon as you do that, the dispute will be submitted for the receivables manager approval, and you would get a message that it has been submitted. So as you could see, the dispute request is 3005 has been submitted for approval, and you click on OK. And the next step is you have to review this dispute. As a receivables manager, you can either approve it or reject it. Alright, so now I will simply come out of this particular form. I can also go and look at the transaction activities as to what's going on, and if there is one. So presently the dispute is under process, so it's not being showing over here, but if a credit memo gets generated out of dispute approval, then it will be shown over here. Fine. So this dispute will now reflect in the collections dashboard or the collections manager view of this particular transaction. So let's log in as the collections manager in collections, and I'm going to take you to collections responsibility, and I'm going to show you how the dispute looks like.